There we go. All right. Where's my... Here it is. Here we are. That's the one I'm looking for. Hello, everybody. So, I don't know if you guys knew this, but evolution has been disproven. I'm not taking it too well, so we're going to suffer through this together. Does anybody know? You know, I have like a bunch of YouTube videos pulled up here, but how do you get it? How do you get it to pause on the... Okay, that's how you do it. You just scroll to the beginning, and then it pauses on the thumbnail. Okay. I will try to keep that in my brain. How are we all doing tonight? Could you guys hear the intro music? Because it doesn't come through on my end, but the OBS, the volume thing was going back and forth. So you should have heard the intro music. There's no music before the countdown timer, but when the countdown timer starts, there's supposed to be music. Once I get an answer to that question, we will begin. Yes, okay. Well, I suppose let's get started here. What's this guy's name? Ave Maria? No. In this video... Ave Maria. That must mean like hello or something. I don't know. Dr. Marco Fasoli, who holds a doctorate in biochemistry from the University of Cambridge. That is surprising. Let's see if it's actually true. PhD in the first link. PhD in biochemistry doesn't understand the basics. Oh, man. That's a lazy or liar. That's actually really funny. All right, so you know he probably really does have that degree. Okay, that's quite unfortunate. Are the comments all glazing? No. Is he really gonna reference Piltdown Man? Oh man. It looks like kind of a mixture of glazing and not glazing. All right, well, let's get started here.
Should be able to be...
I watched like somebody sent this to me in Discord. So if you guys have, there's a recommendations thing in Discord. What's it called? I think it's called Your Video Recommendations. Video ideas and recommendations. I'm pretty sure that's where I got this from. So if you guys are in the Discord and there's something just egregiously stupid you want me to talk about, throw it in there. And I'm going to try to do more live streams because I can only do so many like React things. But all right, we'll speed this up a little bit. And what does glazing mean? It means like you're giving support for something, but like kind of over the top. You haven't even joined Discord yet? Oh, man.
I want to understand if we can actually qualify
He's wearing a Snuggie.
evolution as a scientific theory. Obviously,
Ave Maria is Hail Mary in Italian. Okay. Yeah, there's that like really famous, I don't know if it's an opera song or whatever, called Ave Maria. So I figured it was Italian, but I didn't really know what it was. Okay.
we're speaking about macroevolution. Can this be qualified as a scientific theory?
Oh, it's Jim Bob when he gets older. Can evolution be qualified as a scientific theory? I want to hear again what he said.
As a scientific theory. Obviously, I want to understand if we can actually qualify evolution as a scientific theory. Obviously, we're speaking about macroevolution. Can this be qualified as a scientific theory?
Yes. All right, that's my stream. Goodbye, everybody. See ya. See ya, everybody. That was fun. No, I'm just kidding. We'll really do this. I don't have an outro. Damn it. I got to download. Let me write that down right now. Really not a very efficient use of my time here. We haven't even got started. Outro. Is outro spelt with 2 T's? Outro screen. There we go. I'm like actually figuring out how to use OBS and stuff, guys. It's actually kind of cool. Okay. Back to the video.
Well, we can take Darwin's words himself to answer that question. Darwin himself said that his ideas on evolution are entirely based and totally depends on Elias' geological speculations, which have since been disproved by cutting-edge sedimentology.
No, they haven't. So he's like literally saying, well, according to what people thought 170 years ago, yeah, it's complete. Like let's just ignore all of the science since then. But what did he say? He's got a very thick accent.
Geological speculations, which have since been disproved by words himself to answer that question. Darwin himself said that his ideas on evolution are entirely based and totally depends on Elias' geological speculations, which have since been disproved by cutting-edge sedimentology.
I assume he said Lyles. Yeah. So like, what was that guy's first name? George Lyles? I don't know. Sedimentology. So this guy he's obviously a young Earth creationist. He believes in flood geology bullshit. So I don't know what his argument here is going to be, but yeah. When did Darwin say it? Did he even say that? That's, I'd have to have the quote memorized from On the Origin of Species or some letter he wrote to a friend to know. But I mean, we'll just take him at his word because it doesn't matter because we know so much more than Darwin did in his time.
In a letter, with regards to whether it's true science or not, his theory, in a letter to Asa Gray, he wrote, quote, I am quite conscious that my speculations run beyond the bounds of true science. It is a mere rag of an hypothesis with as many flaws and holes as sound parts, close quotes.
Yeah, in Darwin's time, there were probably not any transitional fossils known, and we didn't know how to do genetics or anything like that. But it's since been confirmed.
At least he's honest.
Now, the speculative nature...
At least he's honest, yes. Take what we knew 170 years ago or whatever it was, and say that and pretend that nothing has happened since then.
Of evolution. So obviously there's been about 150 to 200 years of time since Darwin published The Origins of the Species. And so we can also hear what others have had to say. And the fact of the matter is that there are, despite the very prevalent and dogmatic support that theory of evolution commands today amongst the scientific community, there are a leading and growing number of honest scientists that, following 150 years of fruitless searches for evidence that would support the theory, has spoken about the
genetics literally confirmed everything that we thought about evolution. So what does he mean by fruitless?
About the Darwin's theory. We have Dr. Ernst Chain, Nobel Prize winning.
Did Darwin think whales could come from bears or whatever? I have no idea what he particularly thought about whales.
Biochemistry, who helped develop penicillin in 1972. He called the theory of evolution, quote, a very feeble attempt to understand the development of life, close quote. In another statement he made, he said, quote, I would rather believe in fairies than in such wild speculation as Darwinian evolution, close quote.
Okay, the guy who invented insulin?
Will attempt to understand Darwin's theory. We have Dr. Ernst Chain, Nobel Prize winning biochemist.
Dr. Ernst Chain. Dr. Ernst Chain evolution. What did he say? The antibiotic pioneer. That looks remarkably like a young Albert Einstein. That's actually crazy how much he looks like Albert Einstein. Evolution. Nope, literally not a single thing about evolution. Not a single thing about fairies. That's a pretty short Wikipedia page, but well, whatever. I mean, ask literally the entire scientific community of biologists, and 99 out of 100 will tell you that evolution is well supported.
Who helped develop penicillin in 1972. He called the theory of evolution, quote, a very feeble attempt to understand the development of life, close quote. In another statement,
plot twist, Albert Einstein has dissociative identity disorder.
and he said, quote, I would rather believe in fairies than in such wild speculation as Darwinian evolution, close quote.
Okay, and Spanky said the Bible is fake there.
We have Louise Bonouret, professor of geology at the University of Strasbourg, say, quote, evolutionism is a fairy tale for grown-ups. This theory has helped nothing in the progress of science. It is useless, close quote.
It's completely false. I mean, quite a lot of what we do in research with regard to medicine is based on assumptions of Darwinian evolution. But like it literally helps us understand the past and do taxonomy and phylogenetics today.
And we have Albert Fleischmann, German professor of geology, say, quote, "The Darwinian theory of descent has not a single fact to confirm it in the realm of nature."
Except for thousands of transitional fossils and the entire field of genetics. Okay.
It is not the result of scientific research.
Yeah, is he actually going to make an argument or quote people? I don't know. I'll try to let the video go on a little bit more.
But purely the product of imagination, close quote. Obviously, we don't want to appeal to authority in our discussion, but I think it's important to give a perspective on the words that Darwin himself used, but also on the words of other scientists, eminent scientists, that have taken a dispassionate view on the topic.
And I think this is something that's so crucial to cover because basically, I mean, it's quite shocking to be honest, because in most schools today, in this country, and even in, I mean, we have a brother here from India who was saying that in his education, in his biology textbooks, evolution was all over, was everywhere. So basically it's been
proclaimed as a fact.
It's proclaimed as a fact. And the thing that's quite shocking is that, I mean, as these scientists have just said, there's not a single fact which backs it up. So obviously there's some...
What? God, man, I don't know if this guy's like not allowed to read books that aren't the Bible, but just to say that is so stupid. This was years ago, but I was in Santa Cruz, and there were these two street preachers basically yelling at people that evolution is false. And this girl who, she must have been like a fourth grader or something. She was so small, but even she was standing there going, "What about fossils?" and stuff like that. I mean, she knows more than this guy wearing the Snuggie over here. Jeez. Terminator voice. Wrong.
Something quite strange going on behind the scenes here. Anyway, so the question I have for you now is regarding Darwin's theory, what are the biggest problems that you see in his theory?
There are so many problems. I will highlight just a few.
Crazy robots, to be fair, they might not be lying. They might just be monumental morons, okay? So they may be incredibly ignorant and stupid. Don't necessarily call them liars.
But, you know, we could have lots of talks about this. The whole thing is, as intimated by some of the earlier quotes, is full of flaws. But the fundamental issues with it are, I'll just list them quickly. First of all, evolution is not observed and is not happening today. It has not been observed.
Literally false. Hardy, yeah, I wanted to say Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium it is never observed, meaning that the allele frequencies always change. So yes, evolution is always happening. The Big Bird lineage evolved right in front of Peter and Rosemary Grant's eyes on the island of Daphne Major. Resistant bacteria, all those kinds of things. Even herbicidal resistant, weeds. Those are observed today.
Observed in the past. It presupposes but cannot account for the origin of life. I'm talking primarily biological evolution here.
The origin of life is not required to know that the theory of evolution is true.
It violates an important physical law, the second law of thermodynamics.
Yeah, this guy really, I mean, these are flat earth talking points. These are boomers whose education ended in 1972 talking points. Ugh. Oy vey, Maria? No, I think that's a Santana song.
Its proposed mechanism of natural selection and mutation has been shown conclusively not to work.
Yeah, he's still just reading off of his computer.
It fails to account for the irreducible complexity that we observe in biological systems.
Irreducibly complex systems have been observed to have evolved in the lab before.
It fails to account for the origin of specified information in the biological systems, primarily the genetic code. And
do you say it fails to account for the origin of it?
It fails to account for the irreducible complexity that we observe in biological systems. It fails to account for the origin of specified...
Yep, you don't need to know the origin of it in order for what we know about evolution to be true, because evolutionary theory is not a theory about where did all this stuff come from. In 1972, we knew almost as much as we do now. It's no excuse. If you say so.
information in the biological systems, primarily the genetic code. And it fails because it violates many first principles in philosophy, which actually renders the very concept of evolution metaphysically impossible and hence irrational.
No, it renders philosophy useless and science useful.
That's just a summary of the problems, but it's
more extensive.
More extensive.
I'd just like to ask a quick, because I mean, obviously, you're speaking to someone here who's very, very bad at science. I mean, yes. So biology is probably my worst subject. So could you please
really
expand on some of the things you said? Because to a lot of it, it's like you're speaking a different language.
Yes, I mean, the purpose of these points that I'm making is really to encourage people to do their own research and to be with an open mind. It's all available. It's all out.
But you're telling them the conclusions.
There, it's not spoken about in textbooks, but with an open mind and some research, all these can be found. And I think it's important.
Travis Statham, action hero star. Resurrection is metaphysically impossible. Hey, yeah, there you go. So, interesting.
Important for people to also form their.
Isn't science a form of philosophy? I mean, yeah, that's what people say. So
their own opinion about this.
Sure.
But I will just go through some of these points in a bit more detail. So the first point was that Darwinian evolution is not observed and is not happening today. So whenever experiments have been tried to reproduce or simulate the evolutionary process in the laboratory, they've always failed to produce any new species.
Mm-hmm. Aha. So, yeah. Crying out loud. It's always So they think the Earth is only 6,000 years old. They think Noah's Ark is true. So they believe in Pokemon evolution. And then they say, well, because when I apply my worldview to your worldview, which disagrees with me, we don't see my worldview play out in front of us. Therefore, your worldview is false. No, idiot. We don't think that even can happen. Seeing species evolve in front of us in a lab would be evidence against Darwinian evolution, because it has always been proposed to take vast stretches of time. But, like I said, we actually have seen species evolve. I don't know about in a lab, but in nature, like I said, Peter and Rosemary Grant saw a new species of ground finch evolve right in front of their eyes. The thing about what's difficult with bacteria is it's extremely hard to say whether or not this bacteria is a new species or not, because bacteria don't really have much in the way of phenotypes, but you can perform a transformation, a bacterial transformation, and get a brand new species essentially right in front of your eyes.
I give a quick example. E. coli is
They're straw manning without even realizing it. Yeah, I've made this comment before. It would be sad, or what? It would be straw manning, but straw manning is a tactic. They're just they just literally are too dumb to know that what they're saying is total BS.
Form of bacterium, very, very simple organism, that reproduces every 20 minutes. Because they reproduce every 20 minutes, they've analyzed it over a period of decades now. So you can recreate in the lab, you can speed up evolution, which is, according to the evolutionary theory, can take over hundreds of millions of years, and kind of recreate it by looking at these organisms that reproduce very quickly.
If evolution occurs over hundreds of millions of years, and bacteria are organisms, then no, you don't get that process occurring in a laboratory right in front of you. Like, how can you say that? Like, well, it takes hundreds of millions of years, so let's watch evolution happen in a lab. Oh, it didn't happen, therefore that's... Man, but we've also, I might add, we've also seen, because bacteria can't really become a new species unless, well, okay, never mind what I was going to say, because that's not true, but the transition from, hey, thanks, Samir, prokaryotes to eukaryotes requires endosymbiosis, and we have a huge amount of data to support endosymbiosis. But we've seen the capture of a new organelle in, it wasn't by a prokaryote, it was by a type of algae, but what the heck was it? It it wasn't a type of algae. I can't remember what it was, but a nitrogen fixing endosymbiotic event or whatever has been observed. I think it was like last year. We've also seen multicellularity evolve in the lab I think that was by maybe a type of yeast. I'm not 100% sure, but I know it was a unicellular organism. So we've literally seen multicellularity evolve in the lab. Now you take an organism that is single-celled, like by definition or whatever, and it becomes multicellular, and it's an obligate multicellular organism. By that I mean you cannot take the multicellular organism and like shake it apart and break loose the individual cells and have them live on their own. No, it's obligate. They cannot live by themselves. That is a new species, completely new species. The nitroplasts, yeah, nitrogen fixing. Anything
generation after generation, you can recreate it in the lab. And the bottom line is that, notwithstanding decades of these small bacteria called Escherichia coli reproducing under very favorable conditions every 20 minutes, lots of generation, recreating effectively the process of evolution, they still are bacteria. They haven't become sponges and cats or frogs and so on. They've done these.
They haven't become sponges or cats or frogs. Wow. Yeah. It's incredible. We got to ask these people one time, do you think that that's actually possible? Because I believe in evolutionary biology and I don't think that's possible. So how would this experiment prove how would those results prove me right? Because I'm telling you that would never happen.
A lot of work has been done by a scientist called Lenski on this topic. Fruit flies, they're being irradiated with UV light to try and get mutations to change their form, and all that happens is that they just get deformed and die. They do not evolve.
Yeah, that's not how evolution in nature happens. Evolution, like there are random mutations that are part of it. Again, the time span is incredibly vast, but also it's not just random change for the sake of random change, and let's just pile on more and more and more and more random changes. It is that subtle variations among species allow them to either occupy the niche they currently inhabit more efficiently or take advantage of a new niche, a new habitat, a new type of diet, or whatever. And then directional selection can push them to become more and more different generation after generation. So like we could point to the lizards that have been released on those islands in the Mediterranean. They have weird names. I always forget. It's like Pak, Maraku, something like that. And we've seen large-scale phenotypic changes both externally and internally with them. Well, but they're still lizards. Well, yes, but given the kind of time that, or they're still the same species of lizard, whatever. But given the kind of time that evolution purports to work on, come back in 5,000 years and let's see how different they are.
Mm-hmm. And we have simulations in the IT world. I mean, so the idea was if any scientific theory, empirical scientific theory, in the modern sense of the word, should be able to be recreated through simulation. For example, in the cosmological field or the physical sciences, this is a very common thing. But it has never been able to be successfully recreated through simulations in computer science and IT. And the only way to make it work is if you introduce ad hoc interventions, meaning that you have to kind of fix the parameters in order to get the answer that you want. But that is not how evolution, in terms of the theory of evolution, is meant to work, which is meant to be a blind process with no guiding force. And
sure.
No.
I didn't even understand, like, computer simulations can't replicate evolution unless they post hoc insert some things that make it work. I don't know what that argument was even supposed to be.
No intervention. So it's not happening today.
I doubt 5,000 years is even long enough. We've been breeding dogs for tens of thousands of years. No, I think 5,000 years is actually way more than long enough for those lizards, because I'm not saying they would stop becoming lizards, but they would become a new species of lizard is what I meant. But the thing with dogs is by and large, their environment actually is still the same. We just try to shape the way they look, I guess.
It has not been observed and is not happening in the past. And that's the second point I was making. And here we have to look at the fossil record. In The Origin of Species, Darwin himself made these comments, which are very significant. He wrote, quote, "As by this theory, innumerable transitional forms must have existed, why do we not find them embedded in countless numbers in the crust of the earth?"
Because hardly anybody had made an effort to look for them at that point. And now that they have, we have thousands of them.
Close quote. He himself described the lack of transitional fossils as, quote, "the most obvious and gravest objection which can be urged against my theory." Close quote.
Yes, when the theory was first proposed, there was a lack of a preponderance of evidence. Wow. You mean like every single scientific theory ever? Even if we had no transitional fossils, which is only removing, I don't know what % of the fossil record count as like transitional fossils or whatever. But even if we had none of those, the fossil record would still entirely support evolution, and it would absolutely preclude special creation, because we know how old the fossils are, and we know that by the distribution of fossils, the vast, like, how do I want to say this? We have entire genres of animals that never coexisted. They are separated in eras and epochs and periods and whatever of life on this planet. The geologic record is very clear in that. And the important thing is that's been confirmed multiple times, because that was proposed throughout the 1800s and early 1900s with the naming and sequencing of the geologic layers and putting those time period, like we put names to the time periods. Then the 20th century, when we learned how to date them objectively, we found out that, yep, this life that's been purported to have gone through stages, none of these life forms that we say existed in different stages are dated to the same stage, apart from some like special examples like ginkgo trees and a few others.
Now, at the time, people were saying, "Oh, we haven't looked around enough. We will find these fossils." Okay, so we wind the clock forward 100 years of hundreds of millions of dollars of investment to try and support and buttress the theory of evolution. And atheist paleontologist Niles Eridge, very famous paleontologist, in the 1970s acknowledged that despite massive efforts, nothing has changed. Quote, "It is a simple, ineluctable truth that virtually all members of a biota," which basically means a species or a category of beings, of living beings, remain basically stable with minor fluctuations during their duration.
Yeah, because not even close to 1/10,000th of 1% of things that ever existed become fossilized. It literally only takes one transitional fossil, and we have way more than one. So get wrecked, nerd.
Meaning that there is no new forms that can be observed. The reality is that no meaningful fossils of the intermediate forms that are required by Darwinian evolution has been found to date.
Literally false. All the Australopiths, several different humans, like human ancestors in the Homo genus. We have excellent transitional fossils of whales. We have excellent transitional fossils of horses. We have Archaeopteryx and Hesperornis and many other birds. I just can't believe that he would say that.
Despite the existence of billions of fossils, such a large number, incidentally, argues for a catastrophic event like the global flood. But the fact that these...
It literally doesn't. The structure of the fossil record itself, even if we couldn't date the fossils, the structure of it precludes the flood, because in a worldwide flood, the things that would die first would be land-dwelling, air-breathing animals. But they are the last things to occur. And since they would die first, they would sink to the bottom first. But they are the last things we find in the fossil record. There's also zero explanation for why anything that lived in the ocean at all would die as a result of this.
Transitional forms, as you evolved over time from the simplest organism all the way through ultimately to man, you would expect a lot of intermediate forms,
Sure, yeah.
but they just don't exist. They haven't been found. As evolutionary atheist biologist Jeffrey H. Schwartz admitted, quote, instead of filling the gaps in the fossil record with so-called missing links, most paleontologists found themselves facing a situation in which there were only gaps in the fossil record with no evidence of transformational intermediates between documented fossil species, close quotes. These are scientists themselves saying this. What we see instead is the same living forms persisting over supposedly hundreds of millions of years of...
That's completely false. No, apart from like a horseshoe crab or a ginkgo tree, those are the only two I can think of. Nobody says that we have species persisting for hundreds of millions of years. That is absolutely false.
Supposed evolution.
You should start pulling up the quotes and read the sentences before and after. Yeah, because I was actually just thinking that because I guarantee that in a lot of these, the very next sentence will be something like, nonetheless, that's typically how that always happens. But I don't have them pulled up ahead of time, and I don't want there to be all that much downtime.
Evolution. There are fossils of squids that are supposed to be hundreds of millions of years old that look indistinguishable from the squids of today.
Fucking A. So this is what they do. Fossil squid. They point to, I don't know, guys. How high resolution would you call this picture right here? This is one of those things that drives me absolutely crazy. They pull this up and they say, oh my God, it's exactly the same as squids today. Superficially, does it have 10 tentacles and a mantle like squid do? Yes, that's consistent with evolution. But there's so little detail that you can actually see here. And there's obviously no DNA or anything like that for us to look at. When people do that's one of those things that drives me crazy. Ooh, they'll pull up an insect trapped in amber and they'll be like, oh, look, it hasn't evolved at all. Just ask them, what species specifically is that? Oh, I don't know. Oh, so you don't know that that's a species that we find today. Oy.
Bugs stay bugs, as David Belinsky famously said.
Yeah, what are there, like 200,000 species of bugs? So there were bugs in the past, there are bugs in the present. Therefore, evolution is false? No.
There's no evidence in the past that that evolution has happened.
There's only evidence
evolution
of
presupposes, but cannot account for the origin of life.
Irrelevant.
Scientists have never been able to generate even the very basic constituents of life.
That's completely false. We've found every amino acid and nucleic base in nature, and we've been able to make those things in labs.
Simple chemicals, despite decades of research and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment.
That's really incredible that he would say that. He has a PhD in biochemistry. So somebody said this in the comments, but he probably got his degree just so he could use it as a I don't know, just so he could bolster his bullshit false arguments. Well, I have a degree and I say that it's false. Literally. I think it was urea or uric acid. I don't remember. Something in urine was the very first biological molecule to ever be artificially synthesized, because for a very long time that was a prevailing theory that only life can produce the molecules of life. But that was like in the 1800s when that was proven false.
For example, there's no assembly of amino acids, which are the constituent blocks of proteins, into proteins under abiotic conditions.
That literally is not true. That's not true. I mean, like, amyloids will self-replicate outside of of a host, or not amyloids, but prions will self-replicate even outside of their host. Have proteins ever been made in a lab? Yes. Here, let me zoom in. Yes. Like we literally, man, I wish the biochemist was actually here with me, because they probably know about a lot of the industry sort of applications for that or whatever. But yeah, like we make proteins. Man, this is infuriating.
And the work of James Tour,
oh man,
who's one of the most credentialed origin of life scientists in the world, with 800 research publications, over 130 granted patents, and over 100 pending patents. He basically indicates that there are unsurmountable technical difficulties of generating even the simplest of biological molecules, let alone any kind of simple organism. Experimentally, it's impossible. This primordial soup model that you often see in many of the biological textbooks is just a fairy tale. It's a fable. Mm-hmm. It violates the second law of thermodynamics. This is really a F tier argument. I really, given everything he said so far, I'm not surprised anymore. But when he said it at the beginning, ugh. There's a physical law that basically says that everything tends from an ordered state to a disordered state
in a closed system.
If all the experience that we have is that all natural and physical processes, for example, solar radiation, but also rain, wind, etc., are processes of decay that eventually disintegrate all complex systems. Things will fall apart over time. That's the sort of basic law that is.
The most hilarious thing about this argument is that, according to this argument, it's impossible that life exists on our planet at all. Even if you believe God miraculously created life on our planet, then life is impossible, according to this argument. Unless the argument is, well, eventually living things die, and that's because of... But if you're going to say that things can't evolve, then they can't live either. I really just... Nobody's ever... These people don't think about what their own arguments are, because this is just so incredibly stupid. You'd have to believe, because, like, literally, I mean, to go from a fertilized egg to a newborn child is such a dramatic, that I would argue that that's more of a dramatic change than a species turning into another species, because it happens on a time scale that's, who knows, tens of millions of times faster, and the complexity that emerges from that is tens of millions of times more dramatic than the complexity that occurs between a species turning into another species. So when they say that evolution violates the second law of thermodynamics, what they don't realize is that argument would make life in general completely impossible. You'd have to believe that at all times God is magically allowing life to exist, and that it has nothing to do with, well, you breathe air, you eat food, you drink water, and chemistry in your body happens to maintain life.
It's called the second law of thermodynamics. They can vary the existing parameters of a system. For example, iron can rust, but it cannot innovate the system and cannot change one thing into another, particularly something that is more complex and more ordered. Sure. And yet, we are believed that you can get through these same processes, from molecules to man, as long as we have billions and billions.
Again, if that's possible, you can't go from zygote to human.
Billions of years of time.
Sure.
But the bottom line is you cannot get order and complexity from disorder, no matter how many billions of years you're waiting. A pile of building materials.
Good thing that that's not what happens. Instead, we get extremely huge amounts of low entropy energy constantly supplied to the surface of the Earth in the form of photons. And then life captures that and grows, and things eat. They consume that biotic material, whatever, or consume things that consume that biotic material. Hello from the UK. Well, hello there. Wait, is it still Tuesday? Isn't it? No, it's not. It's after midnight in the UK, so it's not Tuesday, isn't it?
Will not become a house no matter how long you wait, just by waiting for the rain and the solar radiation to make it happen. It's just not going to happen. In fact, over time, the building materials themselves will crumble and disappear.
Sure. And I think, I mean, you might get onto this later, but an interesting thing that I heard in a talk by Father Rippiger is that he basically said, pertaining to this, he said, you can't give what you don't have, right? So a piece of bacteria can't give the complexity that a human being has. It's impossible. Because, I mean...
No shit. Nobody thinks that a bacteria turned into a human being. That's like arguing that a zygote turns into a 40-year-old person. That is, the zygote is... It's kind of weird to call it the ancestor, but we'll do it anyways. An ancestor of it, but it didn't turn into it.
Basically, the cause has to be greater than the effect, right? You can't create something that you don't have. I can't make you rich if I don't have $5. It's like that kind of thing. So thank you. Yeah, so continue. Sorry to interrupt.
We also have the proposed mechanism of biological evolution just doesn't work. We call it genetic. It's called genetic entropy.
Genetic entropy. He's completely incapable of giving any of his arguments with his eyes closed because he has not looked away from that laptop once.
A lot of very good work has been done by Dr. Jan Sanford of Cornell. What he did is he measured the accumulation of human mutations at around 100 new mutations per generation. Now, most mutations have a near neutral effect, are slightly deleterious, slightly negative. A beneficial mutation, things that will give an improvement, are so rare that they're not even considered, essentially. The bottom line is...
What does that mean? Genetic entropy, I think that might be the longest part in my first book that I wrote about. I went through all the science about how it's so stupid. The stupidest thing about genetic entropy, it's kind of hard to pick between two things, but I think the dumbest thing is Sanford literally just pretends that natural selection doesn't occur. It literally doesn't matter. The other thing he says is most mutations are harmful, which isn't true. But even if it was true, he just completely doesn't regard or does not acknowledge that natural selection occurs. Because even if most mutations are harmful, the beneficial ones are the ones that are selected and become more common in the population.
Is this. Every single mutation in the genetic code over time will either have no effect or degrade functionality. They will degrade.
Literally false. This is experimentally known to not be the case. You can do simple examples like bacteria. He's reading a Discovery Institute script. I'm sure he is. Crazy Robots or something like that. But you take bacteria, this wonderful experiment that I use all the time. They took bacteria, deleted from its genome the operon that allows it to digest lactose, and the bacteria spontaneously re-evolved the ability to do it. Beneficial mutation. Added information too, by the way. That's another thing they like to say. You can't get new information.
They do not add functionality. It's a bit like if you have a piece of software and you have a software bug, you're not going to get an improvement in your software. It's going to degrade and probably stop working. Mm-hmm. And what John Sanford demonstrated through his work is that we as humans are actually degrading. We're actually becoming dumber. We're not evolving. And
we know that human beings are actually increasing in general intelligence. It's called the Flynn effect. It's one of the most widely recognized. It's not very well understood why it's happening, but we know that IQ scores have gone up by about a standard deviation every decade or something like that. It might not be every decade. For the last, since we've been keeping track of them. So for well over 100 years. Hold on, I got to answer a text real quick. Oh man, okay. Well, back to work. what's happening. I heard caveman shout, so that was just me laughing. Okay, here we go.
And in the genetic code, over time, will either have no effect or degrade functionality. They will degrade. They do not add functionality. It's a bit like if you have a piece of software and you have a bug, software bug, you're not going to get anything, an improvement in your software. It's going to degrade and probably stop working. Mm-hmm. And what John Sanford demonstrated through his work is that as humans are actually degrading. We're actually becoming dumber. We're not evolving.
Yeah, I heard this.
And interestingly, the rate of mutation tallies with the biblical chronology. That's one.
No, it doesn't.
Of the reasons why.
Oh man, I don't remember if I wrote about this in my book or not, I did. He has this paper he wrote where the paper literally starts off this way. In order to, I'm going to get it not quite right, but he says, in order to build a model that is consistent with the Genesis flood narrative, so in other words, we know all of the scientific data that exists does not work for human genetics with the idea that there were 8 humans on a boat that survived and everybody else died. But if we write this completely fucked paper with that assumption in mind and build the model to force it to work that way, then it works. Except it still doesn't work at all because it doesn't predict, for example, the greater genetic diversity in Africa. And so Sanford in that paper writes a bunch of bullshit saying like, well, maybe Africans have defective DNA repair systems. And that's why it looks like they have more genetic diversity. I'm not kidding you. That's what he says in the paper.
The patriarchs lived for so long because they were closest to the perfect prototype of Adam.
That's very interesting.
And over time, all these...
It's not interesting. It's bullshit.
All these mutations started to accumulate. And that's why lifespan decreased very significantly. We are getting a slight uplift recently, but that's nothing to do with the genetic situation. It's some improvement of sanitation and medical care.
Sure.
But in terms of our genetic patrimony, we are degrading.
Sure. That's very helpful to note. It offers a good explanation to, as you said, why the patriarchs lived for so long. Yeah.
It's also so the bottom.
No, they didn't live that long.
Line is that genetic entropy has now conclusively shown that the fundamental mechanism of biological evolution, which is
what's the argument? 6,000 years ago, people could live to be 900 years old, and then it rapidly shot down. At no point in there are no reports of people living that long outside of the Bible. And I don't even know which book technically. I think it's, after Genesis, nobody lives that long. So they think the flood happened in the year 4004. So for 2,000 years, people, there was just no degradation at all. And then all of a sudden, the flood happens, and for some reason, genetic entropy goes into hyperdrive, and lifespan plummets down to whatever it is today, and then has not changed. So what the hell kind of model says it stays up here for a few thousand years and then instantly drops way down and then stays right here? If it's degrading, then it should be either exponentially going down or linearly going down or whatever. But how do you have stasis for thousands of years? Correction, the Sumerian king lists gives ridiculous ages. Yes, I have heard of that before. There was some king that supposedly ruled for over 1,000 years or something like that. I do remember that now. My mistake.
Genetic mutation. The idea that through genetic mutation and natural selection, you can get increased functionality, increased order, increased complexity. You can go from a molecule to a man, ultimately. Just doesn't work. The mechanism doesn't work. We have irreducible complexity in all biological systems that is, again, refuting Darwinian evolution according to Darwin's own criteria. In The Origin of the Species, Darwin said, quote, "If anyone would prove the existence of a complex organ that absolutely could not have come from a large number of consecutive changes, then my theory would completely collapse." At the time of Darwin, cells were thought to be very simple blobs of goo. But since then, we've had electron microscopy that has shown that cells are very, very highly complex, what we call nanomachinery, like machines on a very, very small scale.
This is going to be an irreducible complexity argument.
And they all have to be, all the functioning parts have to be present at the same time for the cell to exist and survive.
An argument from ignorance is not proof of anything. We'll just front load it with that.
Cells are literally complex cities, which within the interdependent factories and systems, like a headquarter, the nucleus, the transport system, the assembly system, manufacturing, energy production, storage, waste disposal, very intricate systems that all need to be together, otherwise the cell will just die. So this is a classic example of irreducible complexity, a bit like the mousetrap. All the components of the mousetrap need to be there at the same time and have evolved, quote unquote, evolved at the same time in order for the mousetrap to exist and to be working.
Something that I never talk about with irreducible complexity, but I just kind of had the thought now is, what's funny is even Michael Behe's example of the mousetrap can be shown to work even if it has parts missing. But
this is not how evolution is supposed to work. But if you have examples like a mousetrap, Darwin himself said, then my theory is false. Well, what we found throughout the biological world is massive amounts of these quote-unquote mousetraps, these machines that need all of the parts to be there at the same time for them to work, examples of irreducible complexity. So by Darwin's own criteria, his theory fails. An example I'll do very, very quickly is the cellular flagellum, which is used.
We literally know that the cellular flagellum is derived from T3 secretory proteins structures, I believe. So,
by bacteria for motion. It's like a
tail.
It's like a tail. You think of it as a tail.
And we know that it works. Like, scientists have selectively deleted parts of it from bacteria and shown that it still maintains function.
It's got all sorts of...
So it's literally not irreducibly complex, and we also know what structure it's derived from.
It's made up of about 30 proteins with a filament, a hook, and a rotor. So they're very sophisticated on a microscopic scale. The rotor itself can operate at 6,000 to 17,000 revolutions per minute, although the filament, with the filament, it's constrained, so the speed of rotation is down to about 200 to 1,000 revolutions per minute. Still pretty impressive. But it fails to assemble and to therefore be functioning if only one of the 35 genes required to produce the 30 proteins is knocked out.
Literally false. Again, this has been studied. I wrote about this in my book. Scientists have gone through and selectively deleted parts of the flagella, and it still maintains function.
This is an example of irreducible complexity that has been studied by Michael Behe in particular and other scientists that conclusively show that we have these highly sophisticated machines, which Darwin couldn't observe, because the techniques weren't available, but which refute his theory very clearly based on his own criteria.
So just to put this in layman's terms, just to make sure I've understood correctly, we're saying that basically this flagellum only works if all of the parts are together. So it's impossible that gradually over time each part came, because it never would have worked.
Correct.
Okay, that's very helpful. Yeah, thank you.
It also cannot account for the origin of specified information, evolution, in biological system. What do we mean by specified information? What we're referring to really is the DNA and the genetic code. What we have found is that genetic code codes for information. It's like a manual, instruction manual for the production of all the materials and the overseeing of all the activities of the cells. It's incredibly complex. It's massive. And
in the past it would have been simpler.
It's made up of, so we're talking about DNA, of a very sophisticated chemical and physical language that carries meaning. Think of our language, only orders of magnitude more sophisticated.
Yeah, in the past it would not have been as sophisticated.
The words, I'll use simple language. You have genes, you have codons, and so on. But the concept is this. This manual is made up of millions of words. Each word carries a particular instruction or has meanings, has a particular meaning. But the words are so sophisticated, in fact, that if you read the word in...
He's doing the flat earth thing of big numbers scary, therefore not true.
In one way, you get one instruction. If you read it in the opposite way, you get a different instruction. You have mechanism that translates those words into a different language, which then can do other can be read to deliver other instructions. If you read the third word, the third letter of those words, of multiple words, you get a further instruction. What we're seeing is a level of complexity and sophistication which dwarfs our own human language.
Yes.
Imagine, just as an exercise,
Imagine in the past it was simpler, which is a necessity of evolution.
Trying to find a word of 12 letters that gives you one meaning if you read it one way, another meaning if you read it another way, another meaning if you only read the third letters of that word, and another meaning if you translate that letter into a new language. It's just unfathomable. It's impossible.
It's not a language. It's a molecule doing chemistry. Literally 0 miracles take place anytime any cell or any molecule in any cell does anything. There is no need to conjure up magic as the origin for how these things, which do not work by magic, would have come to be the way they are. All you have are arguments from ignorance and incredulity, which is a kind of argument from ignorance.
Yet this is what the DNA that we have in each of the cells of the body and that every organism has can do. So where does that come from?
It's beautiful.
Where does that come from?
The mind of God. Yeah.
So any evolution tree cannot count the origin of the specified information, even though they presuppose it in a sense, because without...
I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but he's completely steamrolling and ignoring the guy in the Snuggie because he's not talking freely. He can't talk freely. He can only do this by going off of the script.
That first replicating organism, there will be no evolution according to them.
Sure.
And lastly, I would say that evolution breaches a number of self-evident first philosophical principles, and I think you were referring to some of those earlier. But these philosophical first principles are principles that do not depend on other principles to exist. They are self-evident. They cannot be proved, but are intuitively true. And our intelligence, our intellect, gives instant assent to them when they're presented to the intellect. For example, the principle of identity. A thing is what it is, or the principle of non-contradiction. A thing cannot be in the same place and with the same respect to another thing at the same time and in the same place. So you have these...
Something can't be, for example, here and there.
At the same time
in the same formality. Yeah.
Quantum mechanics has demonstrated that that's literally false.
Correct. So if Darwinian evolution has to be true, it has to adhere to first principles. And if it doesn't, because first principles reflect the objective order of things, they reflect the fundamental structure of reality of the created world. So if Darwinian evolution fails to adhere to those first principles, then by definition, it can't be a valid theory.
I have no clue where this is going. All of his other arguments have been, once he said like the first 5 words, I knew where they were going. But this, I have no idea what's about to happen.
But the problem is we find that Darwinian evolution violates many first principles, which follows that it must be false in whole or in part. And what are those first principles? You mentioned one of them, the principle of sufficient reason.
Yeah, and you don't know what they are because you have to... We can hear him scrolling.
Reason, either the existence of a thing is unaccountable either in itself or in another. You can't give what you don't have. If I don't have $1 million, I can't give you $1 million.
We don't have magic, therefore magic isn't an explanation for how anything on the planet happened. Boom.
If I don't have eyeballs as an organism, I can't give them to the one that is more sophisticated to me.
You can gradually, literally you can just do this with a language argument. If you don't have modern English 1,000 years ago, then you can't get modern English. It's impossible. The word twerk does not exist. That is my argument that word doesn't exist. Why? Because it cannot be found in the works of Shakespeare. And if it's or any piece of English writing from 500 years ago. And if it didn't exist then it cannot be passed down and exists now. Oh, wait, idiosyncratic changes in language happen spontaneously and then get passed down? What? Just like genetic information can do the same thing? What?
The next one up the ladder.
And the primordial soup doesn't have eyeballs.
The primordial soup doesn't have eyeballs. Nor does the first amoeba, to be fair, but...
Neither did dust, so God obviously didn't create Adam from dust.
The primordial.
You can't give what you don't have. And God doesn't have eyeballs either. No balls. L's in the chat for God, everybody. No balls. Do it, no balls.
So it doesn't have lots of stuff that the first amoeba has. So the first the microorganism.
Sure, okay, yes.
The principle of proportional causality. No effect is greater than the cause. You mentioned that earlier. But here we have a systematic violation of this in Darwinian evolution.
No effect is greater than the cause. Have you ever heard of critical mass, a nuclear chain reaction, before? I would wager that with potential energy, I think you could demonstrate that that's not the case. I'm happy to be told I'm wrong about this, but I mean, if you take a spring, like you take a spring and you cram it down, and then you drop it only a tiny distance, that energy is going to activate, could open up the spring, and then it will rebound higher. I'm not talking about throwing a bouncy ball on the ground and it bounces higher than from where you started. I'm talking about this is different than that. So I don't know. I feel like that's, I don't know. A pebble causing an avalanche. Yeah. Or like the little domino thing where you start with a tiny little domino and it gets bigger and bigger. I'm not sure. I mean, there's always energy lost in any transformation. So maybe on a deep level that remains true, but I don't know.
Life coming from non-life, multi-celled life coming from unicellular life, swimmers from non-swimmers, walkers from non-walkers, flyers from walkers, and so on.
Sure.
People who speak English from people who don't speak English, which we know for a fact happened.
Okay.
It's a constant
a monkey with a grenade. What?
Violation. Principle of resemblance or continuity of nature. Like begets like.
Is that even a thing? The principle of the continuity of nature? And aren't these just generalized observations? The philosophical concept primarily attributed to Gottfried Leibniz that states that in nature, changes occur gradually and smoothly without sudden leaps or discontinuities. Wow. So, in other words, exactly what Darwin proposed. What a fucking idiot.
All life comes from life. So a dog is going to beget a dog. It's not going to beget a cat or an ape. If I plant my
it always bugs me. They assume the first life was an amoeba or something. Yeah, it wouldn't have even have been a prokaryote. It would have been something simpler than that.
Tulips put some seeds or I plant a flower. I'm going to get the flower that I know I planted, not some other flower.
Yeah, sure. That's the thing. It's actually quite useful, I think. I was thinking about this the other day. Like, if you actually think logically about how things reproduce, this is a helpful way to basically dispel this concept of evolution. Because if you're within a species, right, you have a dog, and you follow the genealogy of the dog, let's say over like 1,000 years. I mean, how on earth are you going to get a cat? Like, do you see what I mean? Because it's just going to stay within the...
You don't get a cat, you fucking snuggie-wearing dipshit.
Same species.
Sorry.
It's like the dog breeds with another dog and gives you a dog, which breeds with another dog and gives you a dog. How on earth do you eventually get a whale? I mean, it's just...
Dogs didn't turn into whales, but gradual change over time. Like how you guys think Adam and Eve, you probably think they spoke Hebrew or something like that. And everybody speaks different languages. Now, they believe in the Tower of Babel bullshit, but even from that, languages have evolved since then. So there you go.
It's a completely different it's a different essence. So that's something that's, I mean, very simple.
What they do is they use time. They basically...
Yeah, time which we know we have an abundance of.
Say, well, over billions.
Literally all of the scientific evidence says the Earth and universe cannot be thousands of years old.
Billions and billions and billions of years. You are going to get a little change here and there, and it's going to kind of, suddenly you're going to, a fin is going to come out.
Yeah, there you go. Now you get it.
I see, okay.
And that's the use time. But the problem is that that fails on all sorts of different dimensions. And we're not going to go into into it too much detail. But
yeah, because you can't.
All these other things I mentioned just...
Sure.
And then the last one, I would just say the logical principle. So far, we've talked about real principles, which have to do with the being itself, or the being of a thing. Logical principle, which have to do with how we know about something. And this is the principle of evidence. that is refuted. I mean, basically, an explanation or hypothesis must take into account all of the evidence, and a single piece of evidence that is contrary to or cannot be accounted for by the theory renders the theory false in whole or in part.
This is another argument from ignorance.
And we have seen lots of them already, and there are many more that we can't really explore.
Literally so that's really interesting, because that completely renders all religion literally false, because we cannot account for how any kind of magic would ever occur, therefore it's false. That's actually really funny that he said that. Maybe I'll use that from now on. The philosophical presupposition of what was it called?
Piece of evidence that is contrary to or cannot be accounted for.
Argument from evidence.
The principle of evidence that is refuted. I mean, basically, an explanation or hypothesis must take into account all of the evidence, and a single piece of evidence that is contrary to or cannot be accounted for by the theory
or cannot be accounted for
renders the theory false in whole or in part.
It was done magically. Do we know that magic exists or how it works? No. Therefore, it's false.
And we have seen lots of them already, and there are many more that we can't really explore in this talk, but evolution is not observed, absence of fossil intermediates, irreducible complexity, and genetic entropy. Those facts, taken singly alone, suggest, according to the principle of evidence, that the theory is either false, either in its entirety or in part. And here we have...
What should I say? This guy is either lying or incredibly stupid, but I can't tell. I guess that's kind of the problem. I think that sums it up pretty well. Nobody's ever going to see that comment, but, there it is. Oh, man, that was everything about that was just absolutely unbearable. So thanks for watching with me, everybody. I think we'll do Andrew Wilson. Probably not tomorrow, but maybe on Thursday. No, not on Thursday. So on Thursday, everybody, I don't know if you saw, but I am interviewing Dr. Joshua Bowen. Here, let me see if I can pull this on the screen. Media source. And browse desktop. Oh, you can't do screenshots. They have to be JPEG files. Well, that's stupid. Okay, well, never mind. Well, I'm interviewing Dr. Joshua Bowen on Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific time. So that's 7:30 Eastern time. And we're gonna do a live stream so that there can be super chats. So the topic is, I'm calling it Death in the Old Testament so that it fits in a video description and a thumbnail. But we're gonna talk about more than that. We're gonna talk about times in the Bible where it says something that, or it gives a number or something for something that isn't true. Because I hear this argument made by people like Inspiring Philosophy or whatever, that when it says 600,000 people or 600,000 men left Egypt in the Exodus, well, that's an idealized number. It wasn't really that many people. It's okay, it's a huge problem for biblical inerrancy. Or when it says that God smote 40,000 for whatever, they were chewing gum while walking, and God doesn't like it when you do that, so he killed her or something. Well, it wasn't really that many. So we're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about deaths that aren't deaths in the Old Testament, like Adam and Eve and a few others, and just some other random stuff. I'm sure slavery in the Bible will come up because that's kind of his thing. Adam Brown, love your work and new collabs with Justin. Yeah, I need to collaborate with Justin some more. It didn't work out. His schedule is Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, and Wednesdays probably are never going to be very good for me, but Friday and Sunday didn't work for me this last time either. And I chuckle over yours. So the question was, line, yeah. Yeah. Also, I'm a deadhead. I love your music taste. Thoughts on Jerry Garcia? I don't really... The Grateful Dead is one of those bands like Fish, where it's why is there such a huge following behind this? There's some Grateful Dead music that I like, but I've just the legend of the Grateful Dead seems kind of, I don't want to say like exaggerated necessarily, but it's kind of like, I'm not sure what's going on, but cult followings, if you want to call them that, they happen with TV series and movies and stuff like that too. So I don't have anything against them. I just kind of don't get it. Globeman says beta. Nice. Dexter's Lab, message deleted. What the heck? Is there someone in ironic, inappropriate comments? Yeah, make love, not war. Yeah, I think this person's just being weird. Goodbye, Viking boy. You Viking. Wait, what? Ew, what a weirdo. We're going to put you in timeout for 24 hours. What a weirdo. All right, I will take one more question from the audience. I accidentally typed half a message. Oh, okay. Can you delete your own messages? I assume you can. One more audience question, and then I have to go make pizza. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. True to his name though. Yeah. Yeah. Can I have a slice? No, you cannot. And with that, we're gonna have to call it. Oh, I got a super chat. How many guitars do you have, and which one is your favorite? I have an 81 BC Oh, it's a bass? I've never heard of whatever you're talking about there. I have 8 guitars. I have a Gibson SG, a really cool one. I can't remember exactly what the model on it is, but I have a red Gibson SG. I have 2 Stratocasters. I think one of them's older. It's a 60th anniversary edition. I think it's that one's a made in Mexico. So I have 2 made in Mexico Strats that I really, well, one of them's kind of crappy. The other that one probably is my favorite guitar. That was your other question. My Cherry Burst. It's like a orange and red burst with a, what do you call that with the lines? It's not. Holy crap! What do you call that when the wood has the lines in it? The not flamed maple, whatever it's called. That's my favorite guitar. I have a Gretsch. I can never remember. It's a big fat hollow, semi-hollow body Gretsch, like a BB King looking guitar. The model numbers and names for Gretches are impossible to keep track of. It's like it's a printer or a fax machine. Kitty Cat Peterson is here, everybody. I have a Yamaha Pacifica. That guitar is good, but I never ever play it. It's starting to bug me. I have a 90s made in Japan Fender Jaguar. That guitar is really cool. And then I have the 1959 special reissue edition, whatever. Epiphone Les Paul, but with Gibson electronics. And then this Martin down here. Did I forget something? I don't think I forgot anything. Yeah. Anyway, here's Wonderwall. Quilted? No, the quilted one is different. I think it's flame maple top. Let me look it up. Yeah, flamed maple. That's what it's called. Yeah, not quilted. Quilteds look cool, like on a PRS. A Gibson flamed could look good on it. Or a quilted could look good on it, but no, I like the flamed. This one has that too, the lemon burst. Did you get your sign from LC Signs? If not, why are you a beta? I don't know what you mean by that. 20 guitars and basses. Yeah, that's kind of the problem we have. Anyways, so I am actually going to go now. Bye, everybody. And that should say ending soon.